You made a mistake.
The woman everyone wanted, but no one deserved. People often say beauty is a blessing, but for Shasha, beauty had always been a curse dressed like a compliment. At 35 years old, Shasha was the kind of woman who made people stare before they even realized they were staring. Tall, curvy, elegant. She had the kind of confidence that didn't need attention, yet somehow attracted it anyway. But beauty wasn't her greatest weapon. Discipline was. Shasha was a high-ranking officer in the United States military. She commanded respect in rooms full of powerful men who were twice her age. Strategic, intelligent, unshakably calm under pressure. And outside the military, she was wealthy. Not ordinary wealthy, dangerously wealthy. Multiple businesses, investments across several industries. But despite having everything most people dreamed about, Shasha had one weakness: love. Every man she had ever dated started the same way. Charming, kind, adoring, until they discovered who she really was. Then suddenly their love changed. Their eyes stopped seeing her and started seeing her money, or her connections, or the doors she could open for them. After her last relationship ended in betrayal, Shasha stopped trying, until her best friend Anita finally confronted her one night. "You are dating as Colonel Shasha." Shasha frowned. "What does that mean?" Anita leaned forward. "You are meeting men who already know you are powerful. They are not dating you, they are dating the benefits." Shasha stared at her. "So what do you suggest?" Anita smiled and said, "You have to disappear." 3 weeks later, Shasha did something nobody in her circle expected. She applied for a temporary sabbatical leave. Officially, it was for rest. Unofficially, it was an experiment. She moved to a completely different city, a place where nobody knew her rank, nobody knew her wealth, nobody knew her name. For the first time in years, Shasha lived like an ordinary woman. Her life became quiet, peaceful. Early morning runs, gym workouts, coffee on her balcony. She handled her businesses through video calls and encrypted meetings. But outside her apartment, she was just Shasha. No titles, no power, no expectations. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Until one morning at the gym. That was the day she met Joe. Joe was handsome, late 30s, light skin, strong build, the type of man who walked into a room like he already owned it. He noticed her immediately. He walked over confidently. "Hi, I'm Joe." Shasha smiled slightly. "Shasha." Their conversation was easy, natural, and unlike other men, Joe didn't ask what she did for work. He didn't ask about money. He didn't ask about status. He simply asked about her. For weeks, their relationship felt perfect. They went on simple dates, street food, movie nights, morning jogs. Joe made her laugh in ways she hadn't laughed in years. For the first time, Shasha started believing something dangerous. Maybe this man loved her before knowing who she was. But sometimes, people don't reveal themselves immediately. Sometimes they wait. At the beginning, Joe was everything Shasha thought she needed. Attentive, protective, funny. He remembered the smallest things about her. Her favorite coffee, the way she liked her eggs in the morning, the exact song that made her smile during their car rides. For weeks, Shasha allowed herself to relax around him. No titles, no power. Just a woman who finally felt seen. But sometimes, the first crack in a person doesn't appear during the bad moments. It appears during the good ones. The first time Shasha noticed something strange was during a simple dinner. Nothing fancy, just a quiet restaurant tucked inside a small street corner. The lighting was soft, the food was good, and Joe was talking. He loved talking, especially about himself. Joe leaned back in his chair proudly. "People know my value." He lifted his glass like he was celebrating himself. "Confidence opens doors." Shasha nodded slowly. She didn't mind confidence, but something about Joe's confidence always sounded louder than necessary. Still, she ignored it. Then the waiter arrived with their bill. Before Shasha could even reach for her purse, Joe quickly grabbed the bill. "I got it." She smiled. "That's kind of you." Joe waved his hand dramatically. "Relax, I take care of my woman." Shasha paused slightly at the word my woman. It wasn't the phrase that bothered her, it was the tone. But again, she said nothing. They left the restaurant and walked slowly toward Joe's car. The night air was calm, street light glowing above them. Joe suddenly wrapped his arm around her shoulder. You know something? Shasha looked up at him. What? Joe smiled in a way that felt different. You're lucky I noticed you. Shasha laughed lightly. Lucky? Joe nodded confidently. Yeah. He unlocked his car and leaned against it like a man giving a speech. A lot of women try to get my attention. Shasha raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Joe chuckled. You'd be surprised. Then he looked at her more seriously. But I don't just pick anybody. The words floated between them. Shasha felt a tiny discomfort. What made you pick me? She asked calmly. Joe shrugged. You are beautiful, obviously. Then he added something that changed the energy completely. And honestly, you needed someone like me. Shasha frowned slightly. Needed you? Joe nodded. Yeah. He opened the car door for her. You are the type of woman who could easily get overlooked. She slowly got inside the car, but the word stayed in her mind. Overlooked. Joe continued talking as he started the engine. You are beautiful but quiet, not flashy, not ambitious enough. Shasha turned to look at him. Ambitious? Joe shrugged. Yeah, you just seem like someone who floats through life. He tapped the steering wheel, but that's where a man like me comes in. Shasha stayed silent. Joe didn't notice the silence. His ego had already taken the stage. I'm the kind of man who upgrades the people around me. The word upgrade hit her ears like a warning bell. Shasha looked out the window. Street lights passed across her face. Upgrade. Joe continued proudly. Before me, you are probably just living your quiet little life. Gym, small jobs, basic routine. He glanced at her with a confident grin. But now you are in a different circle. Shasha slowly turned back toward him. What circle is that? Joe smirked. My world. The car fell quiet. But the silence didn't bother Joe. He kept talking. You saw that event last week, right? The one with the investors? Shasha nodded. Yes. Joe smiled proudly. Exactly. Without me, you'd never step into rooms like that. That was the moment Shasha felt it clearly. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet observation forming in her mind. Joe wasn't complimenting her. He was positioning himself above her. He reached over and squeezed her hand. You should be thankful, though. For what? Joe grinned. For me. The car continued moving through the quiet city streets, but something had changed inside Shasha. The charm that once felt warm now felt calculated, and the confidence that once looked attractive now looked like something else entirely. Something louder, something insecure, something that constantly needed to prove itself. Joe kept bragging the entire drive about his success, about his influence, about how women admired him, about how lucky Shasha was to be beside him. And that was the exact moment the first real thought crossed her mind. Not every man who acts powerful actually is. Sometimes the loudest man in the room is the one hiding the most. Shasha watched, listened, and quietly she started investigating him. Joe had no idea. Shasha had resources, connections, people who could dig into anyone's life within hours. Joe's past began to reveal disturbing patterns. Every ex-girlfriend described the same thing. Charming at first, then controlling, then cruel. Emotionally abusive, manipulative. But one detail shocked Shasha. Every woman he dated eventually lost money, large amounts of money. Joe wasn't just arrogant, he was a predator. But Shasha stayed calm. She needed more proof. Then came the night that confirmed everything. Joe insisted on taking Shasha to an elite networking event, the kind filled with wealthy business owners and powerful figures. As they entered the venue, Joe whispered proudly, "You should thank me tonight." Shasha raised an eyebrow. For what? For bringing you into a world you could never access. She simply smiled. 30 minutes later, something unexpected happened. 3 junior military officers walked into the event. They walked directly under Shasha's command. The moment they saw her, they froze. Their boss, standing there, next to a man talking nonsense. They almost saluted, but Shasha quickly signaled them not to. They immediately understood and left the room. Joe noticed everything.
What was that about? Shasha calmly sipped her drink. Nothing. But Joe's ego kept growing. His insults became normal until the night everything exploded.
Every toxic relationship has a moment where everything that was hidden finally comes out. For Shasha, that moment started long before the slap. It began with a phone call. One evening, Shasha was sitting at the dining table inside her apartment, laptop open, headset on. The city lights outside her window flickered softly across the room. Joe walked in halfway through the call. She was speaking calmly, professional, focused. Yes, approve the shipment and move the meeting to Monday morning. I'll review the contract tonight. Joe paused. Something about the way she spoke didn't sound like an ordinary woman. His eyes narrowed. The call ended. Shasha closed the laptop. Joe was leaning against the wall, watching her. How many meetings do you have every night? Shasha shrugged casually. Just small business stuff. Joe scoffed. What business? Online work. Joe laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was the kind of laugh that carried insult. Online work? Shasha, please, you're not fooling anybody. She looked at him calmly. Excuse me? Joe walked closer. You're always on calls, always making decisions, acting like some big boss. His voice sharpened. You are a gym girl who does random side jobs. The disrespect hung in the air. Shasha said nothing. Joe's ego fed off silence. You know what your problem is? He continued. You act like you are better than people. Shasha leaned back in her chair. I never said that. Joe smacked. You don't have to say it. Your attitude says it. Another silence, but this time it felt different. He was trying to provoke her. Joe grabbed a glass from the table and poured himself a drink without asking. You know what really bothers me? Shasha looked up. What? Joe pointed at her. You don't treat me like the man in this relationship. Her eyes hardened slightly. What does that mean? Joe laughed again. You are supposed to look up to me, respect me, appreciate what I bring to your life. What exactly do you bring? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Joe froze, then his face darkened. You see, that right there, that's the problem. His voice rose. You're ungrateful. Shasha folded her arms. Ungrateful for what, Joe? For me. He slammed the glass on the table. I took you out, introduced you to my circle, brought you to events you could never access without me. Shasha stared at him quietly. Joe's voice grew louder. Without me, you are just another woman nobody notices. The room fell silent again. But Joe wasn't finished. His ego had been building for weeks. Now it exploded. You think you are special because you look good. Newsflash, Shasha. There are thousands of women like you. He stepped closer. You should be thankful someone like me chose you. The words were meant to break her. But Shasha simply watched him. Calm. Too calm. Joe hated that calm. It made him feel small. So he pushed harder. You know what I think? He said coldly. I think you are pretending to be something you are not. Shasha raised an eyebrow. Or? Yeah. Joe leaned closer to her face. I think deep down you know you are not on my level. That was when Shasha stood up. Slowly, gracefully. Now they were face to face. The room felt smaller. Joe, she said quietly, you should leave. That sentence ignited him. Don't tell me what to do in a house I practically live in. You don't live here. Joe pointed at her. See, that disrespect again. His voice turned ugly. Sometimes I wonder why I even deal with you. Shasha turned away, trying to end the conversation. Big mistake. Joe grabbed her arm. Hard. Don't walk away when I'm talking. Shasha slowly looked down at his hand, gripping her arm. Her voice dropped. Let go. Joe smacked. What if I don't? Shasha looked up at him. One last warning. Joe, let go. Instead, Joe raised his hand, and in that exact moment, he decided to do the one thing he would regret for the rest of his life. He tried to slap her. But Joe had made a fatal mistake. He forgot something very important. Shasha wasn't just a woman, she was a soldier. Before his hand could touch her face, everything changed. Shasha moved like lightning. Her hand shot up. She grabbed his wrist mid-air, twisted. Joe gasped. The pain was instant. Then in one swift motion, she stepped behind him, locked his arm, and slammed him face first onto the floor. The impact shook the room. Joe cried out in shock.
But Shasha wasn't finished. Years of combat training flowed through her body like instinct. She flipped him onto his back and pinned him to the ground, her knee pressed firmly against his chest.
Joe struggled. It was useless. For the first time since they met, Joe looked afraid. Shasha leaned closer to his face, her voice calm, cold. "You made a mistake." Joe tried to pull free. "Get off me." Shasha tightened the hold. "You think strength is shouting louder than everyone else." She leaned closer. "You think control means intimidation." Joe's breathing became heavy, but Shasha's eyes had changed. They were no longer the eyes of a woman tolerating a boyfriend. They were the eyes of a trained commander. Then she said the words that shattered his world. "Colonel Shasha Williams." Joe froze, completely. The room went silent. And suddenly, everything he thought he knew about her disappeared. Joe started laughing. Not scared, laughing. Slowly, painfully, he stood up. Then he looked straight at her. "About time." Shasha froze. Joe wiped blood from his lip. "You really thought I didn't know who you were?" Her eyes narrowed. Joe smiled. "Colonel Shasha Williams, one of the youngest high-ranking officers in the military." Silence filled the room. Joe leaned closer. "I didn't chase you for money." Shasha's instincts screamed. Something was wrong. Joe whispered quietly, "I was studying you." Then he pulled out a small recording device. "You are part of a bigger game than you realize." And suddenly, everything changed. Joe wasn't just an arrogant man. He was connected to a powerful criminal network that had been trying to infiltrate military business contracts, Shasha's companies, her military influence, her connections. Joe wasn't trying to marry her, he was trying to control her. But what Joe didn't know was that Shasha had predicted this possibility weeks earlier, because the moment his background looked suspicious, she had quietly alerted military intelligence. Joe thought he was hunting her, but in reality, he had walked directly into a trap. For a few seconds after Joe finished talking, the room felt too quiet, too still. Joe stood there with that same confident smile, the small recording device still in his hand like a trophy. In his mind, he had already won. He believed he had cornered her, exposed her, broken her control. Shasha, however, did something that confused him. She started laughing. Not loudly, not mockingly, just a quiet laugh that carried a strange calm. Joe's smile slowly faded. "What's funny?" Shasha took a step closer. Her eyes were steady, sharp. "You really think you are the first man who tried to play a long game with me?" Joe's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the situation you are in." Shasha tilted her head slightly. "Oh, I understand it perfectly." She walked to the table and calmly picked up her phone. Joe watched carefully, suspicious. "You should probably put that down," he warned. But Shasha didn't stop. Instead, she pressed one button on the phone. There was a knock at the door. Joe's body stiffened. He slowly turned his head toward the door. Another knock, this one louder. Joe looked back at Shasha. "What did you do?" Shasha didn't answer immediately. She simply folded her arms. "You should open it." Joe didn't move. The knock came again. Then the door opened. 3 men walked inside, black suits, serious faces, sharp eyes that scanned the room in seconds. Joe immediately understood something was wrong, very wrong. One of the men spoke calmly. "Joseph Carter." Joe's chest tightened. "You are under investigation for fraud, financial extortion, and attempted coercion involving government contracts." Joe's face drained of color. "What?" Another agent stepped forward. "We've been tracking your activities for months." Joe turned slowly toward Shasha. His voice dropped. "You called them." Shasha's expression remained calm. "No." Joe stared at her. "You set me up." Shasha shook her head slowly. "You set yourself up." Joe's breathing became uneven. His mind raced. "But the recordings, the information, I have proof." Shasha cut him off. "You mean the recording device you've been carrying for 3 weeks?" Joe froze. His hand slowly lowered. Shasha walked closer, every step controlled, every movement deliberate. "You thought you were studying me." Her voice was quiet but powerful. "You thought you were manipulating the situation."
Joe said nothing. His confidence was collapsing piece by piece. Shasha stopped right in front of him. But the moment your background check raised red flags, she looked directly into his eyes. You became the investigation. Joe's brain struggled to process the words. You knew? Shasha nodded. From the moment your ex-girlfriend mentioned the financial scams, Joe's breathing became shallow. And every conversation after that, she pointed lightly toward the recording device in his hand, was monitored. Joe's face twisted with disbelief. You were acting. Shasha gave a small shrug. I needed you comfortable. The agent stepped forward. Joe backed away instinctively. This is insane, he said desperately. You don't have enough to arrest me. One of the agents held up a folder. We have bank transfers, witness statements, digital records. Joe's shoulders dropped. And the recording you just made, the agent added, is the final confirmation we needed. Joe's eyes widened. Realization hit him like a truck. He had just confessed everything. Shasha watched silently. Joe looked at her again, anger and humiliation mixing on his face. You played me. Shasha didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. Her voice remained steady. No, Joe. She stepped aside as the agent moved toward him. You revealed yourself. The agent grabbed his arms and placed him in handcuffs. Joe struggled weakly. You think you won? Shasha didn't respond. He kept shouting as they dragged him toward the door. This isn't over. The door closed. The apartment became quiet again, completely silent. Shasha walked slowly to the balcony. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath her. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing, thinking. Then her phone rang. It was Anita. Shasha answered. Well, Anita asked immediately. Did the experiment work? Shasha looked out at the sleeping city. Her voice was calm. I learned something. What? Shasha smiled faintly. Next time, she paused. I won't pretend to be smaller. Because the right man will never need a woman to shrink. And the wrong man will destroy himself trying to control her.
I learned something many women spend years trying to understand. You don't have to shrink yourself to make someone else feel big. I won't pretend to be smaller, because the right man will never need a woman to shrink, and the wrong man will destroy himself trying to control her. Sometimes life teaches us lessons to love us. Some come to test us, and some come to reveal who they truly are. And you don't have to hide your strength to protect someone else's ego. You don't have to dim your light just so another person can shine. The right person will never feel threatened by your success. They won't compete with your power. They will respect it. They will admire it. And most importantly, they will stand beside you, not above you. So never reduce who you are just to keep someone comfortable. Because the truth is simple. The people who are meant for you will celebrate your greatness. The people who are meant for you will celebrate your greatness. And the ones who aren't will expose themselves trying to control it.